Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. This week, we bring back guest host Dave Murray, the DiJulius Group's senior customer experience consultant, to share how companies need to train their leaders how to actually lead. In this episode, you'll learn how in today's workplace, new leaders are typically promoted because they've done their jobs well, not because someone identified them as an emerging leader of others. As a matter of fact, many organizations make assumptions that by simply making their way up the corporate ladder, the new leader is equipped to lead others simply based on past experience. The unfortunate reality is that very few organizations have training in place on the soft skills it takes to lead effectively, especially in a customer experience culture. You'll learn how to create a leadership playbook for your management team so that you can ensure any leader within your organization has the training, knowledge, and support to drive engagement, collaboration, and service excellence across their teams. Now here's your host, Dave Murray.
One of the biggest problems that companies have when it comes to leadership is that they don't train their managers how to actually lead. Think about that for a minute. One of the biggest problems companies have is they don't train their managers, supervisors, managers, directors, whatever the position, whatever the title is. They don't actually teach them how to lead. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And maybe this happens in your world. What does that mean? Well, what it means is, Donnie's our best sales guy. So we need to give him a team. Mary just got her MBA. We better promote her to manager. Or Michael has been here for 5-6 years now. We better make sure we promote him into a leadership role and make sure that he stays. That's what normally happens out there. People get promoted based on their production. No other factors are really looked at. It's they were a good whatever. They're probably going to be really good when they have a team under them. And those aren't bad reasons to promote people. They're great reasons. They're just not the entire picture. And most organizations don't look at that entire picture. For example, does the person even want to lead others? Right? Is it their goal? Right? In a lot of organizations, it's set up that if you want a promotion, if you want the next raise, if you want to grow, that's your option, right? You get a team, right? You get promoted to supervisor. You were once one of them, your friends, you went out on Fridays, and now you're overseeing them, right? That happens all the time. But that person may not understand exactly what the role takes. They may not understand all the things that they need to do for that role. And I'll tell you, salespeople are a great example because a lot of salespeople would just prefer to sell, right? Let me just go sell. I don't want to mess with the team. Let me do what I do. Here's another scenario that happens in a lot of organizations. You have a rock star on your staff, like Mike Rayburn, and they're doing great. They're coming in, they're engaged, and people are drawn to them. They're kind of a leader by example. They seem to be a really good player on your team. So this is a no-brainer. Let's make them a supervisor. Everyone loves them. So you promote your rock star into a supervisory role, but you don't give them the tools. You don't give them the training. You don't give them the time to be a leader. And then all of a sudden, they're no longer a rock star. As a matter of fact, someone who was a true, valuable employee, was probably a brand advocate, is now disengaged. It happens all the time. You could probably think of a few examples right now of where it happened in your organization. Another question is, when we're promoting solely on production, does that person truly know how to have those crucial conversations? Do they know how to lead within the culture that we're trying to create? Do they understand our service culture that we're trying to create and what their role is in that? Do they know how to coach in the moment? The problem is a lot of organizations make assumptions that our team members can do that, but they don't actually show them how. There's no roadmap in place. And I'm going to give you some examples of how you can create that roadmap today. Everything we're talking about, coaching, critical conversations, they're all trainable skills, right? They're all trainable skills, but we have to take the time and give our team members those tools. Are they truly others-focused or are they self-focused? Right? As we know, self-focused don't always make great leaders. Maybe they're great at other positions within the organization, maybe not in a position of leadership. And maybe the biggest problem that occurs when we don't have any sort of internal training or guidance on what leadership means to us in our organization, what it looks like in our organization, we get an inconsistent internal experience. I like to refer to it as winning or losing the manager lottery, right? We've all been there, right? You go to work every day, you love your job. It's usually because you have a manager that supports you, that cares for you, that gives you the tools you need and kind of gets out of your way. Versus a manager that maybe doesn't care that much, maybe you don't even know that well, you don't see very often, and you kind of dread going into work, right? It happens if we're not careful. In one department, team members feel valued. In another department, they don't. And it's in the very same organization, right? Who thinks they can finish this statement? The single most important determinant of an individual's performance with an organization and their commitment to stay with the organization. So let's break this down. Their performance, how well they're going to do in their job. So what's one of the biggest indicators of how well they're going to do in their job, and how long they are going to stay with us, how long they're going to stay within our organization. The single most important determinant of that is, it's the relationship they have with their manager. As Ron Lovett mentioned earlier this morning, everything starts with the relationship. But here's the thing. We know this is so important to how well they're going to do in their job and how long they're going to stick around. Why aren't more organizations focused on this as a strategy? They're not. Very many are not. But we can. We can. So there was a study done by Bain & Company where they surveyed 200,000 employees across the globe, and they found out a few things about engagement. They were focused on employee engagement. They found out a few things as to why employees become disengaged, but what I found more interesting is they found a couple of things that help engagement. And here's what they found. They say, from the study, that supervisors, not HR, not a new initiative, not the CEO making a motivational talk, that leads the change to engagement, right? Just like we talked about before, that relationship with their manager. Now, while HR having initiatives and focusing on engagement and Gallup scores and all those things, those are important. CEOs getting out in front and sharing the message, that's important too. But you can't rely on those things alone. Supervisors are where this happens. The other thing they found out is that we need to conduct regular check-ins. It's not that annual survey. You can still do those if you find them helpful. But the science tells us it's really important to do it often, do it in smaller chunks, and then obviously act on those chunks, that information you're getting, that feedback. But here's the thing. These check-ins don't have to be a survey. They can also be in a meeting format. They can be that leader having a conversation with that team member, right? A sit down, a touch base. John mentioned doing that informally. We have a lot of clients of ours, and there's a lot of organizations that follow this best practice. What a lot of great companies do is they have a strategic leadership one-on-one, where leaders sit down with that team member, and it's the team members meeting. The leader guides it, but it's really the team members meeting, right? If you don't have these in place already, maybe this is a tool that you want to take back and think about starting. One-on-one meetings. They're on a regular basis, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever works in your world. And some of you might say, hey, you know what? That sounds great, but our supervisors have so many people, they could never get through that. Well, there's maybe one of your problems right there, right? If you don't have enough supervisors to handle this, then maybe you have some issues, right? Maybe they have too many direct reports. So it's an opportunity to talk about things that are work-related and non-work-related. But here's the thing. You can't go back and just say, hey, I went to the Customer Service Revolution in Cleveland. It was a great conference. This guy named Mike Rayburn came on the stage and played Bohemian Rhapsody on a guitar. It was amazing. And then some guy came on after and said, we need to do one-on-ones. So starting Monday, let's do one-on-ones. Because we know that won't work, right? We just can't tell our leaders to go do it. We have to show them. We have to give them the time. What do you think of the number one reason I hear when I ask if organizations have a one-on-one meeting in place? What do you think I hear? Who's got time for that, right? Interestingly, a new practice in the call center world, a lot of call centers, when they're maybe opening up a new division or a new department, a new call center, they start with these meetings first. So if they're trying to figure out how many people they have to have answering the phones and how many supervisors they need to have for those people and et cetera, and they're building what the head count looks like, they start with these one-on-one meetings. What's the timing look like? If we want to have a half hour with each team member weekly, what's that math? Okay, that's 10 hours out of their week. That's committed. Good. What else can we build in here? What else can we give them in their 40 hours? Right? They start with this. Because we all know if we ask our leaders, no matter what their great intentions are, if we don't give them the time, it's not going to work. We have to build them the time for them. We have to give them permission to do it. We have to make sure they know it's important. Right? They have to know this is part of what they are doing now as a leader. This is part of our culture. This is how we lead here because it gets us to where we want to go as an organization. And of course, we have to hold them accountable, right? It can't be optional. It can't be you do it when you can. It can't be a nice to have. It's something that we want our leaders to be doing on a regular basis because we know it makes a difference. Let me ask you this. How are your leaders when it comes to having empathy for their teams?
So why is it that when somebody has performance problems at work, why is it that our instinct is to say, you're out? We do not practice empathy. What does empathy look like? Here's the lack of empathy. This is normal in our business world. You walk into someone's office, someone walks into our office and says, your numbers have been down for the third quarter in a row. You have to pick up your numbers, otherwise I can't guarantee what the future will look like. How inspired do you think that person is to come to work the next day? Here's what empathy looks like. You walk into someone's office, someone walks into your office and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. What's going on? We all have performance issues. Maybe someone's kid is sick. Maybe they're having problems in their marriage. Maybe one of their parents is dying. We don't know what's going on in their lives. And of course, it will affect performance at work. Empathy is being concerned about the human being, not just their output.
Not just their output, but think back to your organization right now. During the workday, what's happening in your organization today while you're here and your teams are there? Are your managers or your supervisors just focused on output? Is that how they typically operate? Is that what we're driving right now? Is that the importance? Or are they focused on the whole picture? Are they focused on that frontal cortex like Scott brought up earlier? If we're not asking them to, the answer is probably no. And it's not their fault, because remember, we never told them. We never asked them. Right? So we can't blame them for that, but we can go back and give them some tools.
If you had 15 minutes with John DiJulius, what would you ask him? We want to know. This is Denise Thompson, managing partner of the DiJulius Group, and I invite you to contact us at thedijuliusgroup.com with your questions or write them under reviews, and we'll address them on future episodes.
So speaking of tools, like I mentioned before, we can't just go back and say, hey, let's try these one-on-one meetings. We hear that organizations have some success. Let's try it. We need to give them some tools on what it looks like. So here's an example from Alpenhaus. Jess referenced Alpenhaus earlier. They rolled this out when they rolled out their one-on-ones. They wanted to make sure that they were happening consistently across their organization and that leaders knew how to conduct them. Right? Because we know if we asked 20 leaders to conduct one-on-one meetings without some sort of guide, you would get 20 completely different meetings, right? They knew that. Here's another example from ATI Physical Therapy, where they made sure that certain things got a specific amount of time. They gave their managers time targets, and they made sure that it's as much about the employee as it is about your comments. And they also made sure at the end that the last bit of that meeting was about action planning. What do we have to do next? The other thing that's really important about a one-on-one is it's an opportunity for a leader to learn how I can support you better. People are not created equal. Customers aren't equal. You can't treat customers all the same way. Same thing with our teams. Our leaders have to remember and learn how to coach particular individuals. What works well, what doesn't. Right? This is a great opportunity to learn that. And it's also a great opportunity to make sure that they're actively listening and learning as much as they can so that when it comes time to recognize and reward, they're utilizing forward from that team member and they're giving them something that means something to them. Right? How many times do we give out Starbucks gift cards? And I love Starbucks, but we just hand them out. We don't even know if that person likes coffee, but it's what we have. Wouldn't it be a little more effective that I learned something about you and we got something that meant something to you that you couldn't wait to go out and use that day? You were going to stop at that store on your way home? That's the opportunity to learn that information so the manager can be more effective in that relationship. So the interesting thing is our teams are telling us that they need this. So the predictive index that I know a lot of organizations use as part of their HR process and initiative, they just released a study a couple of weeks ago. And this study tells us that the number one skill that team members currently say their managers are lacking is communication. Well, our team members are saying, I struggle with that too. My manager doesn't seem to do a very good job of that. But it goes back to the question, what tools are we providing for our team members when it comes to that communication? Again, if most of us are promoting on previous production and assuming they'll know what they're doing or they'll learn it along the way, we're going to at best get an inconsistent experience and most likely a lousy experience. What about crucial conversations? What about those difficult conversations? What happens in your organization? I just had the opportunity on Wednesday of last week. It was amazing. I got to go my first visit to the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. We've been working with them since the summer. So on Wednesday, I had the opportunity to stand in front of 70 leaders within the police department in Charlotte and talk about this, talk about leadership and talk about critical conversations. Now, policing is such a noble profession, right? These are people that willingly say, yes, I will put my life on the line. I want to protect and serve my community. But we also talked about when it comes to internal communication, sometimes they have issues that mirror other organizations, right? So we talked about what gets in the way when we have to have that critical conversation. Well, a lot of times it's lack of time, right? I have other things to do, and that conversation, while it's important, isn't quite high enough on the priority list. I'll get to it when I can get to it. The other thing we heard is sometimes we just don't want to rock the boat, right? You probably have that in your organization as well, right? Maybe it didn't bubble up high enough in my perception, but maybe that perception is a little off if we're not careful. So what about accountability? How do you do with accountability from your leaders in your organization? So right down the street is Playhouse Square. If you haven't had a chance to go for a walk, if you haven't been to Cleveland before, if you have some time today, you might want to go down and check it out. It's on East 14th and Euclid, so it's about maybe a 6-minute walk from here. That's the world's largest outdoor chandelier. I know Dan Gingy said you're not supposed to say it's a great selfie spot, but it is a great selfie spot. You might want to go get your picture with that. So we've had the chance to work with Playhouse Square really since 2014. Now here's the thing about Playhouse Square. They are the largest theater district in the United States outside of New York City. They also have the largest season ticket base of any theater district in North America. They're doing a lot of stuff really well, but they knew there was room to be a little bit better. So they created their list of always and never behaviors, right? So their frontline folks know the things they should always be doing or never be doing when they're with a guest. But here's the thing that was interesting. I was having a conversation recently, it was just this summer, with Renee Borner, their VP of Sales and Marketing, and she shared with me that the always and nevers list was really a game changer for them, not just because of the behaviors, but they finally had a tool to hold their managers accountable. It leveled the playing field, right? She mentioned that we all agreed to these in the workshop, that these are the things that we want to do and we don't want to do, right? So now managers, when you have people that do these things, there's no choice. We have to make sure they know. And also, when someone does a thing on our always, give them a shout out. Recognize them. Make sure they know they did a job well done. All right, so think about it that way. The tools that you may already have in place, a service vision, action statement, nevers and always, anything else, how well are your leaders doing when it comes to accountability? Is that an area of opportunity for you? Did anyone read the book, The Challenger Sale? We read it as a team. Mark Bush did. We read it as a team at the DiJulius group and we shared our thoughts. We have a little book club. It's a great book on sales. If you're interested in sales or in a sales position, I'd highly recommend it. But there's one thing that really stood out to me in this book that's relevant to my topic today. When the authors, Matthew Dixon and Brent Adamson, say this: the manager is the fundamental link between strategy and execution. It is where initiatives live or die. Think about that in your world, right? It goes back to the old adage, maybe you heard, if it's important to my boss, it's important to me. If my boss doesn't care, if my boss doesn't talk about it, I'm going to stop talking about it. But do your leaders know how important they are to that? Do they know how much influence they have? Again, if you haven't told them, the answer is probably no. So I told you about some tools that we want to share. We help clients of ours create the internal experience, their internal culture experience. Ones that we created is with Mid-States Concrete, a great organization up in Beloit, Wisconsin. They are a manufacturing organization. They pour concrete, they build buildings. One of the things that we focused on was the first day experience. Ask yourself this: what does your onboarding experience look like? What does that look like in your world? You know, Scott mentioned that a little bit earlier. What happens in your world when someone joins the team? So here's what they did. What do you think happens on the first day experience in your company right now? Sometimes people are probably welcomed with open arms, right? Oh, you're here. Awesome. Sometimes they might walk in and be like, "Oh, you're starting today?" Sometimes you might get "I got to train you? Son of a..." That happens. It happens every day. So they wanted to level the playing field, right? So there's a manager checklist. What does that manager have to do before you come into your new role? They also focus on experiential standards. How can we make this a better experience? In this case, it's a letter from the team welcoming the new employee on their desk when they get there. What are those above and beyonds? How can we go even a little extra? What does that look like? A couple other points I want to make. Got to work with Colton RV. They're a large RV dealership based in Western New York, just outside of Buffalo. I had a great conversation with Casey Colton, who's one of their operating partners of the business. And we were talking about a realization they came to. Maybe this happens in your world. He was sharing with me how they were having a conversation. They were really stuck. Service advisor is a really important role in their organization, right? It's a conduit to the customer, a lot of customer interaction. And he was sharing with me that they were getting people that they were hiring that were great. They were engaged. They did a great job. They loved coming to work for the first 8 months. Then when they got to months like 9 to 17, they started to fizzle, maybe started to call in sick a little bit. By the time they hit 18 months, they were gone. And Casey said, we kept asking ourselves, why can't we find people that will stick? And then he said, we sat in a room one day and said, maybe it's us. Maybe we're not supporting these people enough. So I ask you, what roles do you have in your organization that have a shelf life if you're not careful, if you're not supportive enough. Another reminder, perks do not equal culture. There are no quick fixes, right? Ping pong tables and free lunches, those are great. You can do them, but don't expect those things to create your culture for you. They won't, right? It takes focus. It takes work, and it's at that manager's level. One quick story I want to share with you all. I had a quick conversation with my friend Jay Jeffrey this morning out in the lobby before we started. I haven't seen Jay in a while, and we were just kind of touching base and chatting. We created their internal culture document you see in front of you, the story of us. We worked on that, I guess, probably 2015 or 2016-ish. Here's the cool thing that Jay told me today. I asked, how's business? He said, we're growing like crazy. We started growing when the pandemic hit. We were growing. They are a hospital launderer, by the way. They supply to hospitals and health systems. We were growing. And then he said, the start of this year, it grew even faster. It's accelerated so much. I said, that's amazing. What's going on? What's causing that? He said, here's what happens. Our people show up to work. Our competitors' people don't. We get calls from clients of our competitors saying, can you take care of us? And we say, absolutely. We have a full staff, happy, ready to serve you, right? And Jay credits that to the work he did back in 2016 to make sure that their internal culture was a huge company-wide focus. So, the single most important determinant of an individual's performance and commitment to stay is the relationship they have with their manager. So let's remember that, and let's make sure that we start there. My challenge to you is go back and find a way to make this a priority within your organization.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. Did you enjoy this episode? Consider leaving us a review. We value your feedback and love to hear how you're using the podcast in your organization. To hear more, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.